The first thing you'll want to do is get access to the notebooks that we'll be using in this lesson. I'm assuming that you've gone through this process before and already have an AWS account. So I've already logged into my AWS console here. And I'll just quickly go through getting to the SageMaker console and creating a notebook instance. It never hurts to practice, and this dashboard occasionally changes in appearance. So this is what it looks like as I'm going through this exercise. I've logged into my personal AWS account, and I have my region, which is in Northern California. And you should set this for yourself as well. Then I want to get to Amazon SageMaker, and I can just search for it by name. So here's the SageMaker dashboard. You can see a lot of buttons on the side that point to things like notebook instances, training jobs, as well as things like models and endpoints, which will be useful for monitoring how our models train later. For now, I want to actually create a new notebook instance, so I'm going to click on this button. Now, I actually have a couple of notebooks that I'm in the middle of working with, but it's okay if this is blank or looks a bit different for you. We'll be working with a completely new notebook anyways. So to create a new notebook, I'm going to click this button up here, Create Notebook Instance. You should see this pop up, a place to specify my notebook instance settings. First, I need to add a name for my notebook. You can call this whatever you like, and I'll name it something descriptive, like ML Case Studies. For many of the rest of these values, you can leave them as the default value. For example, the instance type is ML.T2 Medium, which is a CPU instance that's going to be ideal for a development environment. Next, there's the IAM role. In small print, you can see a description of this role. It says choose a role or let us create a role with the Amazon SageMaker Full Access IAM policy attached. This role defines the permissions that your notebook has, like what data it can read or write. And a full access role will give us access to all the public datasets in S3, for example. I'd suggest you click this and select Create a New Role. Here you can see that by default, you have access to any S3 bucket with SageMaker in the name, and we can also specify any additional buckets. But for these examples, we won't have any, and so you can select None here, and then click Create Role to complete a new role. Okay, so we have an instance name, we have a type, and we have a new role that we just created. Now for VPC, lifecycle, encryption, and volume size, you can leave these as the default values. Now you could create an empty notebook instance right now, but we'll actually want to link this to a Git repository, and we can do that with this tab here. I want to link this notebook to a public Git repository. Specifically, I'll want to clone the lesson notebooks that are in a Udacity public repository called ML SageMaker Studies, and I can link to it by name. This repository holds examples for a bunch of lessons, and so I just need to create this one notebook instance to work through all of them. The last thing I need to do is just click Create Notebook Instance. Then you should get back to this main notebook instance page, and you should see that your notebook is in pending status. I actually deleted one of my older notebooks to make room for this new ML Case Studies one. It may take a moment for this to become in service, but once it does, you can select to open it in Jupyter or Jupyter Lab. I find Jupyter Lab to be most helpful when you're moving back and forth between files often, as you might in larger projects. But for these example notebooks, I'm just going to work in Jupyter. When you open this notebook instance, you should see all the files that were in the GitHub repository for ML SageMaker Studies. These are all the lessons and examples that we'll be going through. I suggest you create a notebook instance of your own and have that open in one tab while going through these lessons. That way you can alternate between learning and applying what you've learned. For the first lesson, I'll be working with the population segmentation directory. Tasks and exercises are presented to you in the Pop Segmentation Exercise Notebook, and if you need a place to consult a final solution, you can look at the Solution Notebook. So to work through this lesson, I'm going to click on this exercise notebook. Alright, next I'll go over the task of population segmentation and start loading and exploring the data we'll be working with in this exercise notebook.